They say the best revenge is living well, but sometimes the best revenge is letting your ex-husband's worst enemy raise his only son. When Grant Caldwell threw his pregnant wife out on the street to marry a 22-year-old heiress, he thought he had won the game of life. He had the money, the fame, and the freedom. But he forgot one thing: Daniel Sterling. The man Grant destroyed to get to the top was watching, waiting, and ready to strike. And when Daniel found Grant's discarded wife shivering in the rain, he didn't just see a charity case, he saw the ultimate weapon. This is the story of how a billionaire's ego cost him his legacy, and how the child he rejected became the heir to an heir he could never touch. Grab your popcorn. This gets messy. The rain in Seattle doesn't wash things clean. It just makes the grime stick harder. That's how Clara Bennett felt sitting across from Grant in the corner booth of Le Cavalier, the restaurant where he had proposed to her 4 years ago. The velvet booth felt suffocating, and the smell of truffle oil, usually a delight, was making her nauseous. She hadn't told him about the baby yet. She wanted tonight to be perfect. "I'm leaving Clara," Grant said. He didn't stutter. He didn't look down at his untouched risotto. He looked right at her, his blue eyes cold hard and devoid of the warmth she used to get lost in. Grant Caldwell, the rising star of the fintech world, treated his marriage like a failing stock. He was dumping it before the crash. Clara blinked her hand instinctively, hovering over her stomach beneath the table. "Leaving we just bought the house in Bellevue." "Grant, what are you talking about?" Grant sighed, checking his Rolex, a gift she had saved for 2 years to buy him for his 30th birthday. "The house is in my name, Clara, and the prenup, well, you know how ironclad it is. I've already had my lawyers draft the separation agreement. It's generous. $10,000. Enough to get you set up somewhere. Modest." "Modest," Clara's voice cracked. "Grant is there. Someone else." He smirked, a cruel, arrogant tilt of his lips. "Tiffany Street James. Her father is sitting on the board of the merger commission. You understand, right? You were great for the startup phase, Clara. You were supportive when I was coding in the garage. But Tiffany, she fits the IPO. She fits the future." The brutality of it took the air out of her lungs. She wasn't a wife. She was a deprecated feature in his software. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. Grant paused. For a second, she thought she saw a flicker of humanity. He took a sip of his wine, swirled it, and set the glass down. "That's unfortunate timing," he said smoothly. "But it doesn't change anything. If you decide to keep it, that's your choice. But don't expect me to play daddy. My lawyers will handle child support to the legal minimum, but I want no custody. Tiffany and I are starting fresh. I don't need baggage." Baggage. That was the last word he said to her as a husband. He stood up, dropped a few $100 bills on the table to cover the meal he hadn't eaten, and walked out of the restaurant, stepping into a waiting black SUV. Clara sat there for an hour, frozen, until the waiter gently asked if she wanted the check. She walked out into the rain, the cold water soaking through her coat, mixing with the tears she couldn't stop. She hailed a cab, not to the Bellevue house. She knew the codes would already be changed, but to a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. That night, lying on a mattress that smelled of stale cigarettes, Clara looked at the ceiling fan wobbling overhead. She had $17 in her checking account because Grant had drained their joint savings for an investment 2 days prior. She was 28, pregnant, homeless, and alone. But as she curled around her stomach, a fire ignited in her chest. It wasn't hope. It was rage, pure cold rage. "He thinks you're baggage," she whispered to the life growing inside her. "We're going to show him. We're going to burn his whole world down." 6 months later, the fire had dimmed to a flicker of survival. Pregnancy was hard on a good day, when you were working double shifts as a hotel maid at the Grand Hyatt while living in a studio apartment the size of a closet. It was torture. Clara's ankles were permanently swollen. Her back screamed in agony every time she bent down to scrub a toilet. She followed Grant's life through the discarded magazines guests left behind. Grant Caldwell's tech giant Nexus goes public. Grant Caldwell and Tiffany St. James, the wedding of the century in Como. The photos showed Grant looking tanned and triumphant, his arm around Tiffany, who looked like a porcelain doll, vacant, beautiful, and draped in diamonds. One rainy Tuesday, Clara was assigned to the penthouse suite. It was reserved for a VIP guest who was notoriously difficult. She was 7 months pregnant now, her belly prominent beneath her grey uniform. She was scrubbing the marble countertop of the wet bar when the door opened. She didn't hear him come in. She only realized someone was there when a deep, gravelly voice spoke from behind her. "Leave the scotch. I'll pour it myself." Clara jumped, dropping the rag. She turned around clumsily, her hand bracing her lower back. Standing in the entryway was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite. He was older than Grant, maybe early 40s, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that were dark, intense, and terrifyingly intelligent. He wore a suit that cost more than Clara would make in 5 years. She recognized him instantly. Everyone in Seattle knew him. Daniel Sterling. He was the old money predator of the corporate world, ruthless, private, and Grant Caldwell's sworn enemy. 5 years ago, Grant had worked for Daniel. Grant had stolen proprietary code, launched Nexus, and nearly bankrupted Daniel's firm in the process. Daniel had rebuilt, but the feud was legendary. I apologize, Mr. Sterling," Clara stammered, bending awkwardly to pick up the rag. Daniel watched her, his eyes narrowing. He didn't look at her uniform. He looked at her face. Then his gaze dropped to her stomach, then back to her eyes. He took a step forward, the air in the room suddenly heavy with tension. "You look familiar," Daniel said, his voice low. "I'm just the maid, sir," Clara said, trying to retreat to the door. "No," Daniel said, blocking her path. He wasn't being aggressive, just authoritative. He studied her like she was a complex contract. He was finding a loophole in. "I never forget a face. You're Clara, Grant Caldwell's wife." "Ex-wife." She corrected her chin, lifting slightly despite her fear. Daniel's eyes drifted to her belly again. "And that none of his business," Clara snapped, the protective instinct overriding her customer service training. "And none of yours." Daniel stared at her for a long, agonizing minute. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. He walked over to the bar, poured 2 glasses of water, not scotch, and held one out, torsunt, to her. "Sit down, Clara," he commanded. "I have to finish the room." "I bought the hotel this morning," Daniel said casually. "Sit down." Clara sat on the edge of the velvet sofa. Daniel sat opposite her, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. "Grant is currently honeymooning in the Maldives," Daniel said, "while you are scrubbing toilets carrying his child. Is that an accurate summary?" "I'm managing," Clara said, tight-lipped. "You're drowning," Daniel corrected. "I know Grant. I know he left you with nothing because he enjoys total victories. He didn't just want to leave you. He wanted to erase you. He thinks you're weak. I am not weak." "No," Daniel agreed, looking at her swollen hands. "You're not. You're resilient. But resilience doesn't pay for diapers or college tuition. Grant just announced his quarterly earnings. Nexus is worth billions, and his son, he doesn't want the baby. He doesn't want the burden, Daniel said sharply. But wait until he finds out the baby is a boy. Wait until Tiffany refuses to ruin her figure with a pregnancy. Grant is a narcissist. Eventually he will want an heir, and he will come for yours. Clara felt a cold chill. He gave up his rights. Grant buys judges like he buys shoes, Daniel scoffed. If he wants the boy, he'll take him. Unless... Daniel leaned back, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. Unless what? Clara asked. Unless the boy is already claimed by someone much more powerful than Grant Caldwell. I don't understand. Daniel stood up and walked to the window looking out over the city skyline. I want to destroy Grant. Not just his business, I want to destroy his soul. I want him to look at the one thing he can't have and know it's because of me. He turned back to Clara. Marry me, Clara. Clara dropped her water glass. It didn't break, just spilled over the carpet. Excuse me. Not for love. I don't do love. And not for sex, you're safe from that. A business arrangement. I need a wife to secure a trust fund release from my grandfather's estate that requires me to be settled. You need protection and a future for your child. I will adopt the baby. He will carry the name Sterling. He will be heir to my empire, not Grant's. You want to raise your enemy's son? Clara asked, horrified and fascinated. I want to raise my enemy's son to be a better man than he ever was, Daniel said with conviction. I want Grant to watch his own flesh and blood grow up to crush him in the boardroom, wearing the name of the man he tried to destroy. Think about it, Clara. You can scrub toilets and wait for Grant to steal your child, or you can become the Queen of Seattle and watch Grant Caldwell kneel. The wedding was small, private, and legally unbreakable. Clara moved into the Sterling estate in the Highlands. It was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Puget Sound, a stark contrast to the fake suburban warmth of the house she had shared with Grant. Daniel was a man of his word. He gave her a wing of the house, a credit card with no limit, and the best medical care money could buy. But he was distant. He spent his nights in his study, plotting working, consuming companies. When Clara went into labor 3 weeks early, Daniel was in Tokyo. She expected to do it alone. She was used to being alone. But as they wheeled her into the delivery room, the doors swung open. Daniel was there, still in his suit, looking exhausted but present. He had flown a private jet at Mach speed to make it. He didn't hold her hand, but he stood by the head of the bed like a sentinel. "Breathe, Clara," he ordered, as if commanding a subordinate. Oddly, it helped. When the baby was born, a screaming red-faced boy with Grant's nose but Clara's eyes, the room went silent. The nurse cleaned him up and handed him to Clara. "Lucas," Clara whispered. "His name is Lucas." She looked up at Daniel. He was staring at the baby with an expression she couldn't read. It wasn't hatred. It was curiosity. Lucas Sterling. Daniel tested the name. He reached out a finger, and the baby's tiny hand gripped it. For the first time, the mask of the ruthless billionaire slipped. Daniel looked at the baby not as a weapon, but as a life that Grant had thrown away. "He's small," Daniel muttered. "He's perfect," Clara said defensively. "We need to beef up security," Daniel said, the mask sliding back into place. "Grant is back in town. The press is going to find out about the marriage soon. When they do, the war starts." The reveal happened 2 months later at the horrific Tech Innovators Gala. It was the first time Clara had appeared in public since the wedding. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk diamonds, dripping from her ears Daniel's family heirlooms. She had lost the baby weight, but her softness was gone, replaced by a steely elegance Daniel had hired tutors to instill in her. She walked into the ballroom with her hand on Daniel's arm. The room went silent. Across the room, Grant Caldwell was holding court, laughing at some sycophant's joke, with Tiffany looking bored beside him scrolling on her phone. Grant looked up. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. He saw Daniel Sterling, his nemesis, and on his arm, looking like royalty, was the woman he had discarded in a diner. Grant pushed through the crowd, his face pale. He walked right up to them, ignoring social protocol. "Clara!" Grant choked out. What is this?" Daniel stepped forward, shielding Clara effortlessly. "Hello, Grant. I believe you know my wife, Mrs. Sterling." "Wife?" Grant's voice squeaked. "That's impossible. She's—" He looked at her stomach, flat now. "Where is the baby?" "At home with the nanny," Clara said, her voice steady, though her heart hammered. "His name is Lucas." "Lucas?" Grant looked confused. "Lucas Sterling," Daniel interjected, his voice booming enough for the nearby reporters to hear. "My son." Grant's face turned a violent shade of red. "That's my kid. You can't just— You abandoned them," Daniel said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "You signed the papers. You wanted no custody. I have the adoption decree. He is a Sterling now. And unlike you, Grant, I don't throw away valuable assets." Tiffany tugged on Grant's arm. "Grant, people are staring. Let's go." Grant shook her off. He looked at Clara, seeing the diamonds, the confidence, the power radiating off her. He realized in that moment that the feature he had deprecated was actually the core operating system he needed, and worse, his enemy had upgraded it. "This isn't over," Grant hissed. "That's my blood." "Then you should have been a father instead of a coward," Clara said. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just delivered the truth like a blade. Daniel placed a hand on the small of her back. "Come, darling. The air in here is getting stale." As they walked away, cameras flashing. Clara felt a rush of adrenaline, but she also felt a squeeze of fear. Grant had looked desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. Back in the car, the adrenaline faded. Clara slumped against the leather seat. "He's going to sue," she said. "Let him," Daniel said, checking his phone. "I just bought the law firm representing him. He'll have to find new counsel by morning." Clara looked at him. "Why do you hate him so much, Daniel?" "It can't just be the business." Daniel looked out of the window, the city lights reflecting in his dark eyes. "He didn't just steal my code, Clara. My younger sister, she was his fiancée before you. She was the starter wife before the starter wife. She took her own life when he left her for you. He erased her. I promised on her grave I would take everything from him." Clara gasped. She had never known. "Daniel, You were the innocent bystander," Daniel said softly. "But now you and Lucas, you are the justice." He looked at her, and for the first time there was no calculation in his eyes, just a weary, shared pain. "We are going to crush him, Clara. But first, we have a birthday party to plan. Lucas turns 3 months old next week." The years didn't pass. They accrued like compound interest. While Grant Caldwell was chasing headlines and fighting off antitrust lawsuits inside the high walls of the Sterling estate, a different kind of emperor was being built. It wasn't built on code or algorithms, but on loyalty. Daniel Sterling was not a warm man by nature. He didn't do baby talk. He didn't sit on the floor and stack blocks. But he treated Lucas with a gravity that the boy absorbed even before he could speak. When Lucas was 3, Daniel bought him a pony. When Lucas fell off, Daniel didn't rush to pick him up. He stood by the fence hands in his pockets and waited. "The ground is hard, Lucas," Daniel had said, his voice carrying over the wind. "Crying won't make it softer. Getting back in the saddle makes you stronger." Clara had wanted to rush out her motherly instincts, screaming, but she watched from the veranda. She saw her son, tiny and trembling, wipe his eyes, glare at the pony, and climb back up. Daniel nodded once, a microscopic gesture of approval that meant the world to the boy. That was their dynamic. Daniel was the anvil, and Lucas was the iron being forged. By the time Lucas was 7, the legal battles with Grant had become a dull background noise, like heavy traffic. Grant had sued for visitation 4 times. Each time, Daniel's lawyers, led by a pit bull of a woman named Beatrice Vove, had buried Grant in paperwork. They exposed Grant's erratic schedule, his tabloid scandals, and the revolving door of assistants that Tiffany St. James turned a blind eye to. Grant didn't really want Lucas. He wanted the win. He hated that his son, his genetic copy, was being paraded in society pages as the sterling heir. One rainy afternoon, Clara was in the conservatory repotting orchids. She was 35 now, and the years had been kind to her. The constant anxiety of poverty was gone, replaced by the poise of a woman who managed a major charitable foundation. Daniel walked in. He looked tired. The grey at his temples had spread, turning him into a distinguished silver fox. He poured himself a drink and sat on a wicker chair. "Grant's lawyers filed a motion today," Daniel said, loosening his tie. "They want a DNA test again." "We did that when he was born," Clara said, not looking up from her flowers. "It's a stalling tactic." "It's harassment," Daniel corrected. "But there's something else. Tiffany is pregnant." Clara's hands froze over the soil. "I thought she went to a clinic in Switzerland. In vitro. It's a girl." Clara dusted off her hands and sat opposite him. "Does this change things for us?" "It changes things for Grant," Daniel said grimly. "If he has a legitimate heir with Tiffany, he might lose interest in Lucas. Or, knowing Grant, he'll view the girl as a prop and double down on getting his son back because he's a misogynist who thinks only a male can run Nexus." "Lucas calls you Dad," Clara said softly. "He doesn't know Grant exists." "He knows of him," Daniel said. "I don't lie to the boy. He knows Grant Caldwell is a competitor. He just doesn't know he's his biological father. We have to tell him eventually." "Not yet," Daniel said, his eyes darkening. "Grant is unstable. Nexus stock dropped 15% last quarter. He's desperate. I won't let him poison Lucas until Lucas is immune to the venom." The shift in their marriage had been so gradual, Clara hadn't noticed when the contract ended and the partnership began. They didn't sleep in the same bed. Daniel was old-fashioned and respected boundaries, but they spent their evenings together. They shared books, debated politics, and unified their front against the world. That night, as the storm battered the glass, Daniel stood up to leave. He paused by her chair. His hand hovered over her shoulder, then rested there, warm and heavy. "You're a good mother, Clara. The best I've seen." "You're a good father, Daniel. Better than you think." He squeezed her shoulder, a rare intimacy. "I do it for her. My sister." "I know," Clara whispered. "But I think you do it for us, too." Daniel didn't answer, but he didn't pull away for a long time. The crisis point came when Lucas turned 10. Lucas was a prodigy. It was undeniable. He had Grant's terrifying aptitude for patterns and numbers, but he had Daniel's patience and strategic mind. He was already coding simple apps and beating his tutors in chess. Grant, sensing the boy's potential from afar, decided to bypass the lawyers. It was a Wednesday. Lucas was at his private school, St. Jude's, waiting for the driver. The usual bodyguard, a massive man named Tiny, was distracted by a commotion down the street, a staged fender bender. A sleek silver Aston Martin pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Grant Caldwell sat there. He looked older, puffier. The stress of the failing IPOs and a loveless marriage was etching deep lines into his face. "Hey, kid," Grant called out. Lucas looked up from his tablet. He didn't smile. He didn't approach the car. He analyzed the situation. Stranger. Expensive car. No security clearance. "I'm not allowed to speak to strangers," Lucas said flatly. "I'm not a stranger," Grant said, flashing his famous, charming, although it looked strained. "I'm Grant Caldwell. You know who I am?" Lucas nodded. "You're the CEO of Nexus. My father is shorting your stock." Grant's smile twitched. "Your father Daniel isn't your father Lucas. Look at me. Look at my face. Look at yours." Lucas paused. He had seen photos of Grant in business journals. He had noticed the resemblance, the blue eyes, the jawline. But in Lucas's world, biology was secondary to loyalty. "I know who you are," Lucas said, his voice chillingly calm for a 10-year-old. "You're the man who left my mother at a diner." Grant reeled back as if slapped. "Who told you that Daniel, he's brainwashing you?" "No one told me," Lucas lied smoothly. He had overheard the servants talking years ago. He was a sponge for information. "I did my research. You abandoned a non-performing asset. That's bad business." "I'm your dad," Grant shouted, losing his cool. "I can give you things Daniel can't. I can give you the future of tech. Daniel is old money. He's a dinosaur. Come with me, Lucas. Just for ice cream. Let's talk." Grant opened the car door. Suddenly, a shadow fell over the Aston Martin. Tiny, the bodyguard, was there. He didn't look happy. "Mr. Caldwell," Tiny rumbled, "you are violating a restraining order." "I'm talking to my son." "You're talking to Mr. Sterling's son," Tiny corrected. He placed a hand on the car door and slammed it shut with effortless violence. "Drive away, or I call the police." Grant glared at Lucas through the glass. "Ask him. Ask Daniel about your aunt. Ask him why he really married your mother." The car screeched away. Lucas stood on the curb, clutching his tablet. When Tiny asked if he was okay, Lucas nodded. "I'm fine," Lucas said. But Tiny, "Yes, young master, short the Nexus stock. He looks desperate." 6 years later. Lucas was 16. He wasn't just smart anymore. He was dangerous. He stood 6 feet tall, built like a rower, with an intellect that sharpened every time it hit a hard surface. He was interning at Sterling Holdings during the summer, not fetching coffee, but sitting in on mergers. But the seed Grant had planted, "Ask him about your aunt," had grown roots. Lucas knew the story of the rivalry. He knew Grant stole code. But he didn't know the personal toll. He didn't know about Daniel's sister. The revelation didn't come from Daniel. It came from Tiffany. The St. James Caldwell marriage had finally imploded. It was a spectacular supernova of gossip. Grant had been caught laundering money to cover up losses at Nexus, and Tiffany, realizing the ship was sinking, had grabbed the lifeboats. She showed up at the Sterling estate gates one evening. She wasn't the porcelain doll anymore. She looked hard, bitter, and vindictive. Clara met her in the drawing room. Daniel was in London on business. Lucas was supposed to be in his room, but he was listening from the top of the stairs. "I have the ledgers," Tiffany said, lighting a cigarette, despite Clara's frown. "Grant has been cooking the books for 5 years. Nexus is a shell. If you release this, he goes to prison." "Why bring this to us?" Clara asked, pouring tea. "Why not the FBI?" "Because I want him to suffer before he goes to jail," Tiffany spat. "And I know Daniel is the only one who hates him as much as I do. Plus, I need money. The prenup is void if he's a criminal, but his assets will be frozen. I need a loan." "We don't do blackmail, Tiffany," Clara said coldly. "It's not blackmail. It's a trade. I give you the weapon to kill him. You give me enough to disappear to Paris." Tiffany paused, exhaling smoke. "It's what Daniel would want. Justice for his sister, right?" "Sister?" Clara stiffened. "Oh, come on," Tiffany laughed harshly. "Don't tell me you don't know the girl Grant drove to suicide, Sarah Sterling. That's why Daniel hates him. That's why he picked you. He didn't love you, Clara. He just needed Grant's leftovers to rub it in his face. You were just part of the revenge plot." Upstairs, Lucas felt the blood drain from his face. "He didn't love you. You were just part of the revenge plot." It confirmed his worst fear, that he and his mother were just pawns in a billionaire's chess game. Lucas walked down the stairs. The sound of his footsteps made both women jump. "Lucas," Clara gasped. "Go back to your room." Lucas ignored her. He looked at Tiffany. "Leave the ledgers. Get out." Tiffany looked at the tall, handsome boy, the image of a young Grant, but with cold, dead eyes. She shivered, dropped the USB drive on the table, and left. Clara turned to her son. "Lucas, she's lying about the love. Daniel." "Does Daniel have a dead sister named Sarah?" Lucas asked. Clara hesitated. "Yes." "Did Grant date her?" "Yes." "Did Daniel marry you to get back at Grant?" It started that way." Clara stammered, tears welling up. "But Lucas, it changed. He loves us. In his own way. He loves us." Lucas looked at his mother, the woman who had raised him, who had shielded him. He saw the pain in her eyes. "He's never told me he loves me," Lucas said quietly. "Not once. He shows it, Lucas. He gave you his name. He gave you a future. He gave me a job," Lucas corrected. "I'm an employee, a high-ranking one, but an employee." He picked up the USB drive. "I'm going out, Mom." "Lucas, don't do anything stupid. Wait for Daniel to come home." "I'm not going to do anything stupid," Lucas said, pocketing the drive. "I'm going to end the war." Lucas didn't go to the police. He drove his Audi a 16th birthday gift straight to the Nexus headquarters. It was late, but the lights were on in the executive suite. Grant was there, frantically shredding documents. His empire was crumbling. The stock was in free fall, rumors of the fraud were leaking, and his staff had abandoned him. When Lucas walked into the office, Grant looked up, wild-eyed. He looked like a cornered rat. "You," Grant breathed. "You came." "I came to make a deal," Lucas said, tossing the USB drive onto the mahogany desk. Grant looked at the drive, then at Lucas. A slow, manic smile spread across his face. "You stole it back from Daniel." Grant laughed a jagged sound. "I knew it. Blood calls to blood. You realized he was using you, didn't you? You realized you're a Caldwell." "I realized a lot of things tonight," Lucas said, standing calmly with his hands in his pockets. "We can rebuild," Grant said, pacing the room, his energy frantic. With that drive destroyed, they have no proof. We can pivot. I have a new algorithm. We can crush Daniel. You and me, son. Kings of Seattle. I should have never left your mother, I see that now. She made good genes, but we can fix it. Grant reached out to hug Lucas. Lucas took a step back. I didn't bring the drive to give it to you, Lucas said, and I didn't bring it to destroy it. Grant froze. What? I brought it to show you that I have it, Lucas said, and to tell you that I already uploaded the contents to the SEC, the FBI, and the New York Times. Grant's face went white. You little traitor, I'm your father. Biologically, yes, Lucas said, but you're a bad investment. High risk, zero return. Daniel doesn't love you. Grant screamed, lunging across the desk. He hates me more than he loves you. You're just a trophy of his hate. Lucas didn't flinch. He easily sidestepped Grant's sloppy lunge. Grant crashed into a bookshelf, sending awards and trophies clattering to the floor. Maybe, Lucas said, his voice dropping, maybe I am a trophy. But I'm a Sterling, and Sterlings don't lose. Lucas turned to walk out. Wait, Grant sobbed, collapsing onto the floor among the broken glass. Lucas, please, they'll put me away for 20 years. I'm your dad. Lucas stopped at the door. He looked back at the pathetic figure of the man who had prioritized a merger over his pregnant wife. You should have thought about the long-term projection, Lucas said. Goodbye, Grant. Lucas walked out of the building just as the sirens began to wail in the distance. He sat in his car and watched the flashing lights surround the building. He watched the FBI agents storm the lobby. He felt empty. He had won. He had avenged his mother. He had destroyed the villain. But Tiffany's words still echoed in his head. He didn't love you. Lucas pulled out his phone. He had one call to make. Dad, he said when Daniel picked up on the first ring. Lucas. Daniel's voice sounded concerned, tight. Where are you? Clara is frantic. She said you took the drive. It's done, Lucas said. Grant is finished. The police are here. There was a silence on the line. A long, heavy silence. You shouldn't have done that, Daniel said finally. That was my burden to carry, not yours. It was my mother he hurt, Lucas said sharply. It was my life he threw away. I had the right. Come home, Lucas, Daniel said. Why? Lucas asked, his voice cracking for the first time. So we can celebrate the end of your revenge project, Tiffany told me. About Sarah. About why you married Mom. Was I just a tool, Dad? Was I just a way to hurt him? Silence again. Lucas, Daniel said, his voice sounding older than Lucas had ever heard it. Come home. I have something to show you. Not tell you. Show you. If after that you want to leave, I will give you your trust fund, and you never have to see me again. Lucas hung up. He put the car in gear. He was going home. To find out if he was a son or just a weapon that had finally been fired. The drive back to the Sterling estate was a blur of streetlights and rain. Lucas's mind was a storm. He kept replaying Tiffany's laugh. He didn't love you. You were a weapon. When he pulled into the driveway, the house was ablaze with lights. Clara was standing on the front steps, wrapped in a shawl despite the cold. She ran to the car before Lucas even turned off the engine. Lucas! She pulled him into a hug through the open window. She was shaking. The news. They're saying Grant was arrested. They're saying a whistleblower turned him in. I did it, Mom, Lucas said, his voice hollow. He stepped out of the car. Where is he? In the West Wing study. Clara said, wiping her eyes. "He's been waiting for you." Lucas walked past her. He felt like a stranger in his own home. He walked through the marble foyer down the long gallery hall lined with portraits of dead sterlings until he reached the heavy oak doors of the west wing. This was Daniel's sanctuary. Lucas had rarely been allowed inside without an invitation. He didn't knock. He pushed the doors open. Daniel was standing by the fireplace, staring into the dying embers. He held a glass of whiskey, but he wasn't drinking it. The room was dark, lit only by the fire and a single desk lamp. "You destroyed him," Daniel said without turning around. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. "I finished what you started," Lucas replied, his voice echoing in the large room. "Isn't that what you bred me for? To be the bullet in your gun?" Daniel turned slowly. He looked older than he had on the phone. The lines around his eyes were deep canyons of fatigue. He placed the glass on the mantelpiece. "Is that what you think you are?" Daniel asked softly. "Tiffany told me about Sarah," Lucas said, stepping closer, his anger rising like bile. "She told me Grant drove your sister to suicide. She told me you picked my mother off the scrap heap just to humiliate him. She told me I was just a prop." Lucas stopped a few feet from Daniel, his fists clenched. "Tell me she's lying, Daniel. Tell me you didn't look at me every day for 16 years and see Grant Caldwell's face. Tell me you didn't hate me for it." Daniel looked at Lucas. For a long moment, the silence stretched heavy and suffocating. "I can't tell you she's lying about Sarah," Daniel said. His voice was rough. "Grant broke her. He used her for her connections, drained her trust fund and left her. She took pills a week later. I found her." Lucas felt a cold stone settle in his stomach. "So it's true. I'm just revenge." "No," Daniel said. The word cracked like a whip. Daniel reached into his pocket and pulled out a key ring. He walked past Lucas to a wall of bookshelves. He pulled a specific book, a first edition of The Count of Monte Cristo, and a hidden panel clicked open. Behind it was a steel safe. Daniel unlocked it. He didn't pull out money or gold or trade secrets. He pulled out a battered leather-bound box. He carried it to the desk and opened it. "Come here, Lucas," Daniel commanded. Lucas hesitated, then walked to the desk. Inside the box were things that made no sense for a billionaire corporate raider to keep. A hospital bracelet with Baby Boy Bennett printed on it, a finger painting of a blue horse, a ticket stub from the zoo, a crushed pine cone, a video camera memory card. "What is this?" Lucas whispered. "The first time I held you," Daniel said, picking up the hospital bracelet. "I looked at you, and yes, I saw Grant. I saw the man I hated. I told myself this boy will be the instrument of his destruction. I was cold. I was angry." Daniel picked up the pine cone. "Then you turned 4. We went to the cabin in Aspen. You found this pine cone. You didn't show it to your mother. You ran to me, you grabbed my leg, my expensive suit pants with your sticky, sap-covered hands, and you held this up and said, 'For you, Dad.'" Daniel's voice trembled. He looked at the pine cone as if it were a diamond. I froze. No one had ever given me anything without wanting something in return. Not my father, not my business partners. Just you. A 4-year-old boy offering me a pine cone because he thought I might like it. Daniel looked up, his eyes wet. "That was the day the revenge died, Lucas. That was the day I stopped seeing Grant's son and started seeing my son. I kept the feud alive because Grant was dangerous and I needed to protect you. But I didn't raise you to destroy him. I raised you to be better than him. And better than me." He reached into the box and pulled out a thick envelope. He slid it across the desk. "Open it." Lucas opened the envelope. It was a legal document, last will and testament of Daniel Sterling, dated 12 years ago. "Read the beneficiary clause," Daniel said. Lucas scanned the legalese. "I hereby leave the entirety of the Sterling estate, including majority holdings in Terling Corp., to my son, Lucas Sterling, irrespective of biological paternity." "I signed that a week after the pine cone," Daniel said. "If I only wanted revenge, I would have left you a stipend. I gave you the empire, Lucas. Not because you're a weapon, but because you're my heart." Lucas stared at the document. The date was from when he was 4, long before he showed any aptitude for business, long before he could be useful. Tears blurred Lucas's vision. The anger that had been fueling him for hours evaporated, leaving him feeling small and exhausted. "You never said it," Lucas choked out. "You never said you loved me." "I didn't know how," Daniel whispered, a tear finally escaping and tracking down his weathered cheek. "My father never said it to me. I thought if I made you strong, you wouldn't need love. I was wrong." Daniel walked around the desk. He stood in front of Lucas. The Iron Man of Seattle looked vulnerable. "I love you, Lucas," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the best thing I have ever done. You are not Grant's legacy. You are mine." Lucas broke. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Daniel. For the first time in 16 years, he didn't feel like he was hugging a statue. He felt his father hold him back, gripping him tight, shaking with silent sobs. In the doorway, Clara stood, watching her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The war was over. Not the war with Grant that was just business. The war for their family was won. The trial of Grant Caldwell was the media event of the decade. The evidence Lucas had provided was damning. Fraud, embezzlement, insider trading, money laundering. It was a laundry list of corporate sins. Grant had tried to plug the holes in his sinking ship by stealing from the passengers. Lucas attended every day of the trial. He sat in the front row wearing a charcoal suit flanked by Daniel and Clara. Grant looked terrible. He had lost 30 pounds. His hair was thinning. He wore a cheap suit provided by his public defender because all his assets were frozen. When Grant took the stand, he tried to play the victim. He cried. He pointed at Daniel. He screamed that it was a conspiracy. "That man," Grant shouted from the witness stand, pointing a shaking finger at Daniel. "He stole my life. He stole my wife. He stole my son." The prosecutor, a sharp woman who didn't buy the theatrics, simply asked, "Mr. Caldwell, did you or did you not sign away your parental rights 16 years ago in exchange for 0 child support obligations?" Grant faltered. I was under duress." "You were at a steakhouse," the prosecutor deadpanned, "and you left your pregnant wife with no money to pay the bill. No further questions." The jury took 3 hours to deliberate, guilty on all counts. The judge was merciless. "Mr. Caldwell, you have shown a breathtaking arrogance and a total lack of remorse. You treated people like disposable commodities. It is time you learned that justice is not a commodity you can trade." Sentence: 25 years in federal prison. No possibility of parole for 15. As the bailiffs cuffed Grant, he turned to look at the gallery. He didn't look at Tiffany, who was sitting in the back row, writing a tell-all book in her head. He looked at Lucas. "Lucas," Grant called out, desperate. "I'm your father. Doesn't that mean anything?" Lucas stood up. The courtroom went silent. He walked to the railing. "You're a biological donor, Grant," Lucas said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "Daniel Sterling is my father, and he taught me that a man is defined by his actions, not his DNA. You're bankrupt in every way that matters." Grant slumped as the marshals dragged him away. Outside the courthouse, the paparazzi swarmed. Microphones were shoved in Daniel's face. "Mr. Sterling, Mr. Sterling. Do you have a comment on your rival's sentencing? Is this the final victory?" Daniel looked at the camera. He put one arm around Clara and the other around Lucas. "I don't have a rival," Daniel said calmly. "I have a family. The rest is just noise." They got into the limousine and drove away, leaving the chaos behind. 10 years later. The Seattle skyline had changed. The Nexus Tower was gone, rebranded, and absorbed into Sterling Bennett Global. The office at the top of the Sterling Tower was bustling. Lucas Sterling, 26, and the newly appointed CEO, was reviewing the quarterly projections. He was formidable, brilliant fair, and terrifyingly efficient. But unlike the man who had sired him, his staff adored him. He knew the name of every janitor and intern. The door opened, and a young girl ran in. She was 5 years old, with curly hair and bright eyes. "Daddy!" Lucas's face transformed. The serious CEO vanished, replaced by a beaming father. He spun his chair around and caught her. "Maya. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be at Grandma Clara's." "Grandpa Daniel brought me," she giggled. "We went for ice cream. He let me have 2 scoops. Daniel walked in behind her. He was 70 now, moving a bit slower, using a cane, but his eyes were sharp. He wore a soft sweater instead of a suit. Retirement suited him. "She negotiated," Daniel said with a smirk. "She has your skills, Lucas. I didn't stand a chance." "You're getting soft, old man." Lucas laughed, bouncing his daughter on his knee. "I earned the right to be soft," Daniel said, sitting on the sofa. "I spent 40 years being hard, so you could be whole." Lucas looked at his father. The gratitude never really faded. "How is she?" Lucas asked. "Clara. She's in the garden. She's happy, Lucas. Truly happy. We're going to Italy next month. No business. Just us." Lucas smiled. "Good," his secretary buzzed in. "Mr. Sterling, there's a man in the lobby. He says he knows you. He doesn't have an appointment. He says he just got out." Lucas went still. Daniel stiffened on the sofa. "What's his name?" Lucas asked, though he knew. "He says his name is Grant. He says he's looking for a job. Any job. Janitorial mailroom. He's begging, sir." Lucas looked at Maya, safe and loved in his arms. He looked at Daniel, the man who had saved them. He thought about the man in the lobby. A man who had once been a titan, now reduced to a beggar, released early on good behavior into a world that had forgotten him. "Tell him we're not hiring," Lucas said quietly. "Sir, tell him." Lucas paused. "Tell him the position has been filled. But give him the number for the shelter on 4th Street. My mother's foundation funds it. They'll give him a hot meal." "Yes, sir." Lucas hung up. "You're kinder than I would be," Daniel noted. "I'm not being kind," Lucas said, kissing the top of his daughter's head. "I'm just indifferent. Hate takes too much energy, Dad, and I have better things to invest in." Lucas stood up, holding Maya's hand. "Come on. Mom is waiting for us. Let's go home." They walked out of the office, the 3 generations of Sterlings, the one by blood, the one by choice, and the one by love. Down in the lobby, a grey, broken man watched the elevator indicators go up, realizing the doors would never open for him again. Grant Caldwell walked out into the rain, and this time no one was watching. And that, my friends, is how the ultimate revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about outgrowing them. Grant Caldwell thought people were assets to be acquired and dumped. He died a pauper in a world he used to rule, while the son he threw away became the king he could never be. It brings up a tough question. If you were Lucas, would you have helped Grant at the end? Or did he deserve to be turned away? Let me know in the comments below. I really want to see your take on this. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of karma, betrayal, and redemption, please destroy that. Like button, it helps the channel more than you know. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. We drop new dramas every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for listening, and remember, the best revenge is a life well lived. See you in the next one.